Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'll wait for a few more folks to join the meeting before we get started. Good to see some familiar names in the attendees list. Thanks so much for joining us during what I'm sure is a lot of folks' lunch. I'm very, very excited to kick off today. My name is Kelsey Behringer. I am the Chief Operating Officer over at Packback. I'm very excited to be with Michelle Barton today. Michelle, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, kick it over to you.
Yeah, hey everyone, my name is Michelle Barton. I am an instructor in the sociology department at LSU. I finished my PhD in 2019 and I've been teaching there full time for several years, most of which now I have been using Packback questions in my classes. And so as an instructor, like many of y'all, I have way too many students, over 600 this semester. And so I got to be one of the very first people to use deep dives in my classes. And I am super excited to be here with all of you today and tell you about what that experience was like.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So Michelle will be, the professor voice in this webinar today. Michelle has grades due this upcoming Tuesday, 6 days away, vacation plan, and then we'll actually be joining the Packback team full-time as an experience manager. So look out for all of the amazing work Michelle will do at Packback. So the purpose of the webinar today is threefold. The first thing we want to do is just show you very high level, what is deep dives? What did we aim to do? And what did we build? And then we're going to talk a little bit about our early access results. Deep dives has been around for only a short period of time, about, I believe, 4 months at this point. We've had our first term of usage, so I just want to look at some of those results there. And then finally, what I'll do is go ahead and walk through what has been built in the last week, or I should say, pushed to live in the last week, and then what's on the agenda for the next few weeks, month, and then potentially 2023. So excited to get started. In the chat, I have Jess Tenuta, our Chief Product Officer, the builder of deep dives, if you will, the designer. So she'll be answering any questions in the chat that pop up. And at the end, we will have a Q&A for any outstanding questions. So with that, let's get started. Deep Dives is Packback's new long form writing tool. So Packback has had since 2015, 2016, I'm always fuzzy on the year, a discussion platform. That's exactly how Michelle joined our team and started working with us. And our discussion platform is based off of inquiry-based learning, self-determination theory, and is really the formative assessment for an instructor. It's giving students the opportunity to write every single week in a safe space where they're not actually being formally assessed for content and ideas. Now, many instructors said, I love questions, it's doing amazing things. I just wish I could write essays in Packback questions. Like I wish my students could submit their work in Packback, our case studies, our essays, our research papers. That, of course, wasn't the purpose of Packback questions, but it kept coming up as a theme ever since I joined the team and back in 2017. So what we did is we took a look at what AI exists in Packback questions, and then we said, what would it look like if our team built a long form writing tool? And that's what happened with Deep Dives. So Deep Dives has been utilized for the first time this fall semester. About 8 months after we decided to build it, it went live. And its implementation has been used across research paper, essays, journal articles, reflections, case studies. Really, if it's writing that students create and must be graded by an instructor for content and ideas, it belongs on Deep Dives. So let's talk a little bit about what is Deep Dives doing, what is kind of the AI behind this tool. Now, there are 3 core features of Packback Deep Dives. It's going to be our digital writing tutor for students, our research assistant for students, and lastly, the grading assistant for instructors. So let me walk you through what those 3 look like at a very high level. First up, our digital writing tutor is going to give students feedback as they write their papers. On the right-hand side here, it's going to be giving them feedback on their grammar and mechanics. So things like, do you have repetitive content? Do you have grammar issues? All of these things that students really need support with, especially our students who ended high school in COVID. It's essentially bringing the writing lab to them. is what this looks like. So an alert from our AI might look like this. It might tell students that they are in the correct word count, and this word count is set up by the instructor in their rubric, but they might have repetitive content. Another pop-up might be that their flow or organization is a little bit off, or their formatting is incorrect, or their paragraphs are too long, or their paragraphs need to be shorter. These sorts of things are exactly what our AI is trained to get feedback on, writing and mechanics. Now, as far as researchers, we know that students need to learn how to figure out if a source is credible or non-credible. So what we've built is a way to give students feedback on the credibility of their sources. So yes, we have a citation generator and we're coaching them how to do things like cite in text. But what we want to do is teach them how to think about assigning credibility to sources. So we're going to give them feedback on a website. We might say, hey, this is a trusted or a non-trusted domain. We might tell them, hey, this website has user-generated content, generally not credible. We might say, hey, this has really low traffic. This is probably not great. Or, hey, this is a news source and it might have biased language. So we're able to give them feedback on their source. You know, if it is an ISBN, we're able to trace that back to the publisher, the publication date, and give them specific feedback on their sources. Again, what we want to do is make sure we're tooling students with the skills to be better writers after they use Packback. So the live coaching needs to come with the why so they can implement that moving forward. Now, we're giving students lots of feedback as they write. We know that if feedback is going to be effective, it needs to be instant, right? So this is helping students be better in the moment. Now, that's very much the reason why I'm at Packback is to support students. And I'm sure that's why everybody in this webinar is here, is because they want to be better educators to serve students, right? Now, that said, students are not going to receive quality education if their instructors are fighting burnout every day. So while we definitely want to provide amazing coaching to students, we also want to alleviate some of the stress of grading for instructors. And that's a lot of what we aim to do. Now, if we save you X amount of minutes per day, we want you to take that back to be a person, but we also want you to use a small percentage of that time, retool it to actually act as the instructor of your content and build that connection and passion with a student as it relates to giving them feedback related to the course content. So let's show you how we do that. What we're going to do is our AI is giving students feedback in real time according to a rubric that you create on these, AI sort of writing and mechanics components. Then when it's time to grade, you're going to be given a recommended score on all things related to writing and mechanics. What you're able to do is click to see why our AI assigned a certain score. So it'll give you a breakdown of the algorithm and exactly what the weights are and how it works. And then ultimately let you override if you want to. So this isn't a black box grader. We're not going to force a score on you. The only thing you need to do here is grade for content and ideas. So did they ultimately meet the goals of the assignment? Did they get their point across? Did they justify their claim with evidence? All those sorts of things. So I'm going to go ahead, pause here, and look to Michelle briefly to answer a question. So Michelle saw these 3 slides from her experience manager, Anne, back probably in the middle of the spring term. And after seeing these slides, decided, yes, I would love to use deep dive. So I want to just hear a little bit from you about, after seeing this, what were you feeling? What were you thinking? And then why did you ultimately decide to be an early adopter?
Yeah, great question, Kelsey. Thank you. So I will edit what you said just a tiny bit because I think I had made the decision to use deep dives even before Anne was done with her 3rd slide. As I said, I am an instructor, so I teach hundreds of students every semester, and there's only one me, which is probably better for the world. But anyway, so as an educator who cares about students, we know that we're sending them out into the world to go do hopefully wonderful and amazing things to make the world a better place and to do the kinds of jobs that they dream about doing. And we as instructors and as educators know how central writing is to them doing their work, right? Because we all are in this world, we're all invested, we want it to be as good as we can. And so what I was feeling very frustrated with in my job was my inability to really give students any meaningful feedback about writing whatsoever. I was teaching several higher level classes, 4,000 level classes. So by the time students were getting to me, they were seniors. So they had gone through their English sequence, they had gone through all of these other classes, and their writing was atrocious. Um, Many of them, some of them were good writers, right? But a lot of them were struggling. And it just did not, I didn't have enough time to really give them any more feedback other than you need to proofread. I would suggest you go to the writing center, etc., which left me feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing enough to prepare these students for the world that they're going into, and constantly feeling like, how could I do more, right? So what Kelsey was saying about the power of deep dives really being that you're bringing the writing center to students. The students don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to make an appointment because let's be real, um, many they have the resources, many of them are not, but they get that instant feedback. And that was just so appealing to me as an instructor who really cares about setting my students up for success.
Absolutely. Before my days at Packback, I taught AP chemistry, and I was like, I felt so comfortable and confident sending them off to the AP exam for the multiple choice piece of that exam. But when it came to writing, I just felt like I can get them there with the chemistry concepts and the application. It's just their ability to communicate in long form writing. And I just said to myself, I'm not a writing expert. I'm not a writing teacher. Great with numbers, terrible with letters. So I definitely just empathize with all instructors who are not writing instructors, but find themselves feeling the guilt to become one in order to serve their students. So it's a very real sentiment that we're not escaping anytime soon. So let's talk about the early results of the first term of deep dive usage. There we go. Our team had some very lofty hypotheses going into this fall of exactly what deep dives would do and what results would be achieved. And ultimately, they were hypotheses. That was it. And it was claims and it was hopes. And what we ended up being able to achieve, I think, is way more than we thought was going to come to fruition. But, I've always been incredibly confident in this product, and it's just need in academia. So part of me is not surprised at all. So let's talk a little bit about what this fall has looked like. We've had just shy of 200 higher education instructors utilize deep dives in fall of 2022, alongside Packback Questions, our discussion platform. So very commonly, students were spending a few weeks writing discussions weekly on Packback and then submitting their long form writing assignments on deep dives. Overall, that means about 14,000 students in higher education were using deep dives this fall. So what we did is we sent out to instructors a preliminary survey before classes started to just understand what time they were spending grading and their satisfaction with student writing. And then a post survey, we received 53 responses on that. And then what we did with students is sent one survey, because we know that one survey was enough of an ask for these students. And we just had them reflect on their writing experience before and after deep dives, and we received 600 responses on that. So I'm going to first start by taking a look at the student sentiment. The biggest takeaway and the biggest exciting conclusion is that students will get more A's if they utilize Packback deep dives. Part of that is because the rubric is so obvious and right in front of them as they're typing. They can't really escape it. They're doing all of their writing synthesis in one place, but they're also getting this live feedback as they type. So they're way more likely to stay on topic. They're seeing kind of exactly what questions they need to be answering in the text with our guiding questions. So 11% increase in student reporting A's, which is absolutely amazing. While we, of course, want students to perform better, I think what's even more important and what's much more challenging is how they feel when they're in our classrooms. If students don't feel confident, if they feel like they're being set up for failure, they're just not going to persevere, right? They will not persist through a course. They won't persist through a, subject matter. They won't persist through a career. So this is incredible in that 55% increase in students reporting that they feel confident writing compared to before deep dives. And we saw a 26% decrease in students reporting that they didn't feel confident, right? So in general, what we have is just student sentiment much stronger and more confident towards writing when they're using deep dives, which is important if we want students to keep trying to write. And as we know, practice is perfect. So if students are feeling shut down, lack of confidence, they're going to stop practicing, and it's just going to snowball into a very poor writer who we're going to have an even harder time of picking up. Now, some qualitative feedback from our students, you can read that here. What I want to focus on is the very last piece of qualitative feedback, which is that the writing assistant has been very helpful in sharpening my writing skills and improving my use of English. This is from an ESL student on the platform. Myself, I taught about 50% ESL students when I was a high school teacher, and I felt like all I needed to do was help them communicate their ideas in English better, because they are at the exact same skill level conceptually with the material, right? They just need help communicating those ideas because English is not their first language. And that's really hard to do as an instructor when your topic and your subject matter and your expertise is chemistry and not the English language. So this is just another tool in our tool belt as educators to support all of our students, regardless of where they're coming from and what skills they may have. So I want to just pause here and again, ask Michelle, it's been almost a full semester, T-minus 6 days, utilizing Packback deep dives and questions. So what would you say are the biggest changes you're noticing in students, or your biggest takeaway with student behavior after deep dives?
Yeah, absolutely. So like Kelsey said, I use deep dives in a 3000 level class, sociological theory, which is actually a very scary class for many of our students to take because it's very abstract and known to be tough. So they've been doing their Packback questions every week for the semester, where they get to engage with all of the, really abstract concepts on the weekly and get to talk with each other. And then they've used deep dives twice now. So one for their midterm paper and one for their final paper. And so just, in my reflections as an instructor, looking through their work, their ability, like Kelsey was saying, their ability to present their ideas clearly has improved significantly, because they're getting that instant feedback. If the AI flags something and says like, hey, you might want to change this, the student then goes back and changes it, right? And makes those edits. So by the time it gets to me, it's kind of like it's gone through at least one round of probably better editing than what I would do. Given that, the AI knows all these rules probably even better than I do. So by the time it's getting to me, exactly like Kelsey said, I'm able to really use my mental energy, which, I mean, let's be clear, all of us are in finals right now, is probably like not as much as any of us would like. So what precious mental energy I have left over, I can focus on their conceptual application, right? Like, this is where you could have taken this idea further instead of getting distracted or overwhelmed, or at worst having to translate this writing that may make it really difficult to grade their work. And just, as an instructor, I think this is a particularly powerful tool for students who might be sort of in the middle, maybe not being super great writers, but maybe, not having the same resources as some of the great writers. And as a sociologist, I'm really sensitive to the way that inequality pervades, in our classrooms. And so I feel like deep dives and having that assistant right in front of them for both the grammar, the mechanics, the research, all of it, again, is really going to help those students who may not have had as much formal training as the students who are going to do well either way, with or without it. And so I think that's where I've seen the most powerful improvements, which, it goes again back to what the data shows about students feeling more confident. So again, from my perspective, and as Kelsey said in the beginning, I am transitioning to the Packback team soon. But had I remained in teaching, I don't think there's any situation in which I wouldn't continue using this tool, because the improvements were just so drastic.
Thank you so much. That's very exciting to hear. Every time I hear it again, it just makes me happy. Well, let's talk a little bit about the impact on the instructor experience, because again, we are ultimately serving the student, and we are here to build curiosity, engagement, and critical thinking skills in students at Packback. But as a former instructor, I know just how important it is to just save any minute we can of the instructor experience, even if it's not all of the minutes, right? So instructors are spending a significant less amount of time grading on deep dives. I'll have Michelle talk a little bit about exactly why this has been happening, but in general, 75% of instructors are spending less than 10 minutes per paper grading than before deep dives, which was only 41%. I think the overall decrease in grading is something between 30 and 40%. It's pretty dramatic. And it's not just because our AI is helping you grade. So I'll have Michelle speak to that a little bit in a moment. But what I think, again, is more important than these quantitative facts is just like, how are we feeling about student writing? I felt very overwhelmed with the concept of student writing. I felt guilty and I felt scared. And what we wanted to do is ask instructors, are you satisfied with student writing? And there's an 89% increase in instructors reporting that they were either very satisfied or satisfied with student writing with deep dives. So we're seeing a drastic increase with just satisfaction in student writing. So again, it's important to understand, are we saving time, but are my students becoming better throughout the process? So this has just been amazing to hear from instructors and see come to fruition. Now, qualitative feedback, the theme here is I'm saving time grading and my student writing is better. So Michelle, I want you to speak a little bit to your experience about why, grading has been a little bit easier for you and just your own experience as an instructor. Just selfishly, what have you gained from this tool?
Yeah, I mean, as I said in the beginning, I think it's better for the world that there is only one of me that exists. However, having this suite of Packback tools really has let me scale my ability to really educate students in a way that I could not do if I was just on my own. So in some ways, I kind of feel like I've cloned myself and I have this like Michelle that can just grade their writing, right? Which again, if you're an instructor who cares about your students, which I'm assuming we all are because we're here on our lunch break, possibly during finals week to learn about this, that's what you want, right? But as one person, again, there are significant challenges. I know I'm a mom, I have small children, I have other things I do in my life. And so anything that's going to make grading faster and be easier is always going to be a win in my book. And the time thing I think is really important to point out, right? Like, yes, I'm spending less time grading my essays and things like that. But I think what I really want to speak to is saving the time, but also, again, that mental energy of not having to translate, okay, what is a student trying to tell me here? What are they trying to argue? What are they trying to present? And instead, because it's just so much more clearly presented, it allows me to engage with them more deeply than I would if their writing was, what it would be normally. So again, just kind of thinking about it from the perspective of saving me time, but also expanding what I'm able to do for my students. And one other thing, because I know myself included, I'm a grand millennial. I, have been learning new software my entire life, but my palms still get a little bit sweaty every time something new comes up. I just want to really give a shout out to the Packback engineering team because this is one of the most intuitive, user-friendly platforms that I have used during my time as a higher educator. We use Moodle in the free version of Moodle at that at LSU. So, LMSs can be tricky, but Packback was super, super easy to use. And at one point, again, because, it was a select group of people using it and everything was new, I emailed Anne, my experience manager, and said, it would be really great if these two screens could scroll independently. That would make my job easier. And 2 days later, when I went back in to finish up grading midterms, sure enough, they scrolled independently. And so, from a perspective of an instructor, that's important too, because if I'm going to be spending hours in this software, in this digital space, I want to make sure that it's intuitive and working for me and that the team is responsive. and wants to build a product that is great for not just students, because we've talked a lot about that, but instructors as well. Someone in the comments, I used it for the writing portion midterms. I had no students report issues to me about figuring out how to use it. Yeah, it's super intuitive. I didn't either. None of my students were like, Dr. Barton, I can't figure this out. Everyone was just like, this is cool. It works. So the Packback team did an excellent job, Jess included in designing such an intuitive product.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was one of the hypotheses I had personally coming into this experiment was, if students have 80% less writing and mechanical errors, well, we have to do less dusting off of their actual content and ideas, and we're just going to be able to go straight to the source, and we're going to save time there. Of course, the AI is giving us suggested scores, and that's going to help us, but it's really access directly to their points, right? So I think that's exactly what we found, which is incredibly exciting. Yeah,
sorry,
continue.
there were just a few other comments in the chat that I was reading about, and several people were saying that they really loved the idea that the AI made suggestions to students, but didn't force them to do it, right? So again, it's not changing their work for them. It's not auto-correcting them. It's really teaching them how to become better writers. So that was just something I wanted to highlight really fast.
Of course, jump in wherever. I absolutely love hearing your experiences. It's amazing. The white paper we put together on all of these results that I just walked through and then some are all accessible via download. And this will be sent to you following this webinar. So you'll have access to this white paper. And if you would like the raw results, just reach out to our team and we'll go ahead and send them over. So what I want to do is spend the remainder of the time outside of a Q&A at the very end to talk about what's new for the spring of 2023. And by spring of 2023, I don't mean March, I mean, January 1st of 2023. So for everyone's spring term, winter quarter courses, smart highlighting for students. So we were giving students feedback on their writing before December 1st. But what we weren't doing is highlighting exactly in the text where they were using inappropriate words or where they maybe had the grammatical error. So what we've done now is turned on smart highlighting, which is going to show students exactly in the text where they have these issues that our AI has caught. And what's going to be cool is on the professor side of things, when you're seeing that students got a 4 out of 12 for their grammar mechanics, you're going to see exactly where in the text our AI has found these issues. So whatever the students are going to see at the time of submission, that's what you're going to see in the grading experience. So this was released almost a week ago. It's all finished now. It's live in the platform. So what I'm going to do is actually show you a little bit what this looks like live in the platform. I'm a little bit rusty with my live demo, so I'm hoping everyone's going to be incredibly gracious with this. I've only played around with it for a little bit now. But what you can see is as I write my draft, I can see alerts and suggestions for those main areas. And I'm going to just hop into grammar and mechanics here. Wherever there's a little glasses icon is exactly where smart highlighting is able to, kind of push students in the right direction. Now, for the past week, I've been writing things I need to write, like memos and emails. I've been writing them in deep dives because I've never been a confident writer. I studied chemistry. I've always loved numbers. I've always hated words. And I've learned so much in the past week on deep dives. It's been honestly like super fun. But here is where I can go. I can understand exactly what the suggested replacement is and just why this was flagged as a non-standard term. Here I can see my spelling error. Hey, did you mean first? Now here's what I want to show you as what I've learned. Is this right here. This is what I learned this past weekend typing, is that you don't need apostrophes when you are typing out something like a year. So we're telling students exactly why it's a grammatical error and giving them a little bit of context around it. We're not just saying, hey, this is wrong. Because if you were to tell me that this was wrong, I wouldn't have the reasoning or the logic or the understanding to know why. So we're actually coaching students on that. So this is what our smart highlighting will look like. Things like formatting a presentation, grammar mechanics, all of those things word count in depth. I want to show repetitiveness flag. If a student is writing the same sentence over and over, we'll actually go ahead and be able to tell them, hey, this is repetitive, and then tell them exactly what percentage of the sentence is repeated elsewhere. So think about when you're on the other side of this writing assignment, when you're able to see why students lost points, and you'll see repetitiveness, and then you're going to be able to see in the text exactly where students might have been copying and pasting text, or copying, pasting, and slightly adjusting, those sorts of things. I would say the most common piece of feedback we got from students this fall in our surveys was, I love the live feedback, but sometimes I don't know what it's referring to. And so that's exactly what we did, is we're telling them exactly what we're referring to. So that is live as of 6 days ago, incredibly exciting. Let's talk about smart highlighting for instructors. So at the end of December, what we're going to see is smart highlighting for instructors. So a feature I have not talked much about are guiding questions. So when you set up your writing assignment, what you can do is basically list out any guiding questions that you think a student should be answering within their submission. It's not necessarily the prompt itself, just guiding questions to support the prompt. So let's say you have 3 big questions you want answered in the essay. What we'll actually be able to do is, when you're grading, tell you where in the text we think students have answered that question. So we're not going to grade content and ideas on your behalf, because that's exactly why you're here, and we need human connection and education. We want Michelle giving feedback on her course concepts to students. But what we'll do is just put your eyes in the exact right direction. What's also going to be coming is the inclusion of must include keywords. So if there's any sort of word that students must include in the text, we'll go ahead and have that there. And then additionally, of course, with smart highlighting, is you'll be able to see the student experience of smart highlighting when you're in the grading experience for students. So that will be at the end of December. So that will be live, ready to, rock and roll by the beginning of your spring term if you're utilizing Packback Deep Dives. What I'll talk about from here is what else is coming. So upcoming feature, I believe this should be live by the end of January, so probably in time for any assignments that you are completing, is going to be originality reporting, so plagiarism detection. So what you'll be able to do here is see if there is matching text within our platform already from our existing database that has been spent years building up with our Packback discussions. And then also we'll look outside of Packback onto the web to see if we find a matching text outside. Now, here is what you can see, what we're building. I want to add the context of Packback Questions has been around for 5 years, 6 years. It's been around for a while, 7 years. I don't even know what time is anymore. Packback Questions has been around for a while. Packback Deep Dives, we started building this at the very turn of 2022. So this is a very brand new product. It was easy to build. I shouldn't say it was easy to build. I bet the engineering team is cackling as I say that. It was easier to build because we had this base of AI that was already being used on Packback Questions. We just had to take that, retool it, modify, right? To go ahead and then, of course, build a lot of other really amazing, cool new things. Definitely don't want to discredit our beautiful AI engineers. But there's so much more to come with deep dives, right? This tool is going to keep growing, keep evolving, gain new functionality. So, this past fall, instructors could only adopt deep dives alongside questions. I would say that it's a very powerful duo because you get formative assessment, summative assessment. And I would argue that students are much better at submitting their deep dives, overall writing assignments when they are using a weekly discussion because they have that practice before they get to the game. But you can now have a standalone deep dives community only, completely decoupled from Packback Questions. Right now in the grading experience as an instructor, you're able to give one piece of feedback for content and ideas and a little dialogue box that students read when they read their submission or their graded assignment. What we're going to have for spring 2023 is inline commenting. So highlight text, give them a piece of feedback. So more than one piece of feedback in that text. Gradebook Sync will be coming summer, fall for deep dives. Right now we have Gradebook Sync for our discussion platform, not for deep dives right now. We'll be going ahead and having more customizable rubrics. Right now there's one content idea rubric, or one content and ideas rubric with a 1 through 4 score that you can put in customize, requirements for. We're going to let you have multiple and more customization there. We'll have some grammar feedback updates, which I'm very excited about, some formatting improvement updates as it relates to MLA and APA. We're going to be able to actually detect outlier essays for you by looking at all submissions as one and telling you if something looks off in one or the other. And then lastly, for students, which I'm incredibly excited about, is recommended sources. We have all of this information from in our platform of student behavior, specifically when they write about X, these are the sources that they cite. So we'll be able to say, hey, you're writing about X. Have you thought about reading these sources? So we're helping students find the most credible sources based off of what they're writing. I'm incredibly excited for that one. I'm going to pause here for a Q&A. Whatever questions you have, put them in the chat. If there's anything highly technical, I'm going to go ahead and ping that to Jess to take because she has the beautiful engineering brain that I simply don't have. And will be better suited for that. But please go ahead, throw your questions if you have them, and I will take them from here. And then just let me know if there are any questions from the chat that you think are worthy of answering right now.
I think there was a great one on, I was debating answering this in the chat versus having a conversation about it. At the very beginning of the conversation, Andrea Neely, Anna Kliss asked a great question around, and I'll come back on video actually. So yeah. Anna asked a great question around AI generation. There's been a lot of buzz in the media and in the Twitterverse right now around the release of some new language generation models. ChatGPT is the big one that's recently gotten a lot of press. So we've been obviously researching and thinking about this and talking about this a lot internally too. And, you know, I wish I had a perfect answer for you. The world is changing quickly on all this stuff, but the way that we're thinking about this is it's kind of twofold. There are things that we can do to help protect and catch obvious cases of risky behaviors on the platform of a student potentially using a AI written essay, right? And bring that to the instructor's attention. There are models that exist that are sort of like the counter models to these generation models of being able to look for markers in the text and say, hey, this probably wasn't written by a human, it was probably written by AI. I'm much personally less excited about the potential of like, how do we catch all the cases where a student may be using these new models and look ahead to the future of where the world is likely going to go with all these amazing new tools that are emerging that have good and bad applications, and ask questions around how do we reduce the incentive for cheating by doing things like we do in Packback of if we bring the feedback to them in the writing process to help them get to hopefully 100% on their paper by the time they submit, the incentives to cheat are lower, right? Then it's not a grade on the line of, if I use an AI generator, I'm going to get 100%, but if I write it myself, I may struggle, because we're helping them to get that feedback up front. And I think it opens up a whole new world of assignment types that may not have existed in the past. I think where the world is probably going to go, and I don't have the answers on this, but just in looking at what it's capable of and how fast the technology is moving, I think we're probably going to see a lot of careers move towards where they might have been generating a lot of work in the past, people moving towards jobs that are more directing the AI and then editing the quality of that output. So I think there's a lot of really exciting opportunities for education companies and teachers to start thinking about how do we build assignments that prepare students for that world. So in short, I think it's a combination of aim to catch the most egregious cases and bring them to the instructor's attention so they can have a conversation and talk about why you might not be learning if you're just running something through an AI system, and then reducing incentives for cheating and building new assignments that use the best of these models to help students be prepared for what the world is really going to be like 10 plus years out. So that's very speculative, but that's how we're conceptualizing this and trying to think of the balance there.
100%. Thank you so much for answering that. And if you wouldn't mind taking this next question, which is, what is an outlier essay and what will our deep dive software be looking for?
Of course. So right now, everything that we give feedback on is specific to an individual student's submission. So we're looking at what has the student written compared to what are the requirements in this instructor's rubric, and what is our set of models that we've built around, grammar and around flow and around structure that only need to look at that individual student's submission to give them feedback. The outlier detection model is one of the first models that we're looking at that rely on looking at all of the student submissions in a class, building trends about those submissions, and then finding things that are different between them. So an outlier essay doesn't mean it's bad, and it doesn't mean it's good. It just means it's different. It means you might want to spend a little bit of extra time poking around in that essay, looking at what was different about the students. But it actually, honestly, may surface more positive and exciting cases of this student had a genuinely unique opinion. And actually, back to the prior question, one of the interesting things about AI generation is you end up kind of they end up kind of optimizing towards a mean. You put the same prompt through, you kind of get a similar thing back out generally. So finding outliers that actually show, hey, this is a novel perspective, that actually might be a way of looking at, instead of trying to catch all the cases of potentially a student abusing AI, catch the cases where they are certainly and evidently writing a unique and interesting perspective. So I'm really excited. It's very much an R&D project to see how that one shakes out, but it's our first moment of looking at how do we look at a whole body of essays and then build trends to empower instructors with better data about their whole class instead of each essay as an atomic piece of a submission.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Any other questions that we can answer for you while we're here? If you have questions for Michelle, a Deep Dives user, myself, a lover of all things helping students, or Jessica, the brains behind the product. And with that, if you're interested in utilizing Deep Dives for this spring, you can always chat with your experience manager if you have one of our consultants at Packback, or you can email Jess at jess@packback.co to get set up with some one-on-one time. We have one more question coming in. Any difference between a student creating an essay in the platform or pasting an essay into the platform? Jess, do you want to take this one and just chat a little bit about the student experience?
Yeah, so we anticipated and expect that students may not always be writing directly in Packback. There are many, many totally valid reasons as to why someone might not do that, right? Comfort level with different technology, students who are using, our system is accessible, but students who might be using assistive technologies and they're comfortable working in a particular platform, or they want to save 15 versions of an essay and then decide which one they actually want to submit. All manner of valid behaviors that our goal here, the main behavior we're trying to drive is not, hey, move from writing wherever you were writing before to move to where we want you to write. It's let's get you the feedback up front so that by the time you're submitting your best possible work. So if a student pastes their essay in, they still at that moment get all the feedback generated. So, Kelsey, when she was showing that essay, if she had pasted all of that text in instead of writing it right in there, all the same feedback would have been dynamically generated, and they can go through a revision process from there. So I do think that there's a lot of value in over time incentivizing people writing in real time in the platform. And it's a measure of our own, like we're looking at that to measure our own success of how easy the platform is to use, how many people are writing in the platform versus elsewhere. The majority of students are writing in the platform. But the important thing is to make sure that even if they don't, it gives them all the same feedback that a student who wrote in the platform would have had.
Absolutely.
I was just gonna say, Andy, yep, this will be, the recording will be sent in follow-up in addition to the white paper right after this session.
Perfect. Yeah, I believe I read something in a student feedback that they really appreciated that they have their research in one tab where they're doing all of their, preliminary, let me just word vomit exactly what I'm thinking about this source. And then I get to write in one tab. They don't have to go to different places. They don't have to have multiple tabs open with all of their research up. It's just all in that one place. And that was a piece of positive feedback we've received from our students. Any other questions we can answer? Perhaps a wonderful way to sign off today, if we don't have any other questions, is Michelle, maybe just to share any wisdom, sentiment, or advice to anybody in this webinar who's considering utilizing Deep Dives for spring, but might be hesitant for whatever reason.
Yeah, sure. Andrea asked a question before I do. She asked, what is the price
Thank
point
you.
for Deep Dive standalone? So I'll just pass that to you first.
Awesome, thank you. The Deep Dives price is the same exact price as Packback Question, so $29 per student for the standalone. If you couple them together, it's a discounted $49 price point, and you also have the instruct tools at your disposal, which is a couple of different things like polling and bulk feedback tools.
Awesome. So thank you, Kelsey and Jess, for having me today. It is such a joy to get to nerd out and talk to all of y'all who clearly care about student success and in teaching. It's always fun to have these conversations. To anyone who's here and is thinking, I'm not so sure, maybe you're hesitant to learn a new technology or, to try something new. I can totally empathize again. As someone with lots of things going on, it can be really overwhelming to try to learn one more thing. But I promise that by the end of this semester, if your experience is anything like mine, you will have so many moments where you see your students doing better and learning more and having more engaged presentations and thoughts that you couldn't have ever done on your own. And so I think it's, again, to echo everything I sort of said before, is that it just really has allowed me to do so much more. And this is without all of the exciting things coming, the smart highlighting and the plagiarism checker. And if there's individual questions that anyone has about, what do you do if you're in, X situation or whatever, I'm happy to field those as well, because there's really, really simple workarounds for a lot of those other things. And once these other additional products roll out, there it will be all in the platform itself. So if anyone has any questions, you can reach out to me as well.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for attending again. I know that this is probably the time you usually eat lunch or take a break for yourself, and or you're prioritizing this over maybe grading some finals. So I really appreciate the time. Michelle, thank you so much for joining. Appreciate you so much and so excited for your official first day at Packback, just very selfishly. And Jess, thanks so much for coming off mute and chatting a little bit about AI generated writing, because I know it's definitely a hot topic right now. With that, have a wonderful week and have a wonderful holiday break. Everyone, make sure you take care of yourself, rest, and enjoy some maybe some well-deserved boredom in the next few weeks. With that, it's been so wonderful. Have a wonderful time, everyone.